Right. Hi, folks. It's Trenton Bennett, and I'm here with author Robert G. Williscroft, Dr. Robert G. Williscroft. So, we're talking about a series that he did called the Oort Chronicles. And while we've already released books one and two, and I'm getting ready to narrate three, I would love for Robert to share with us a little bit about all four of them, if you've got a minute.
I do. Everybody knows the name Elon Musk. Imagine a guy like Elon Musk, uh, very wealthy, very smart, really smart engineer who comes up with a diagnosis of terminal cancer. What do? You can't stop it. Nothing on earth can keep you from dying. And what he does, Braxton Thorpe, my hero, arranges to have his head cryogenically preserved when he dies. That's actually the prologue to the book. And then in the first chapter, he wakes up about 100 years later in an electronic matrix, is terribly confused. It takes him a while to get his bearings and figure out. But then again, he is Braxton Thorpe, smart, rich beyond belief at this point, because his riches have continued during his time in cryogenic preservation. He begins to explore what's called the global net, which is kind of an extension of what we think of as the internet. This is done with small disks clustered together in orbit, in low Earth orbit, and in higher orbit around the Earth. And in his explorations, he runs into another entity. Not quite sure what it is, but when he sorts everything out, it is a group mind of a race that pre-existed humanity on the Earth and ended up residing as electronic uploads in the Oort cloud. And they explained to him that some really bad guys came to our solar system long, long ago, nearly destroyed all life on Earth, and they're on their way back to do it again. And that is the basis of Icicle and what Thorpe and his people and the Oort, as he comes to call them, do to try and prepare humanity and maybe do something about the incoming invasion. And the book ends with the invasion and how they handle it. And I won't give away a spoiler here.
Yeah.
The second book, the Oort Federation, picks up where the first leaves off. And at this point, the Oort Federation is the dominant political factor in the solar system. It's a loosely knit together federation of people, planets, moons, space habitats, and so forth. They're not so much governed as it's a forum where they can air their differences and work out compromises. And there is a serious opponent. His name is Isidor Orlov. He comes out of the Russian oligarch grouping, and he's pretty powerful, and he forms a formidable opponent. Both Braxton, Thorpe, and Orlov managed to develop faster than light vehicles, each using a slightly different technology, and as an aside, technologies that are currently being worked on in laboratories and are likely to happen in the not too distant future. A friend of mine and fellow science fiction author Alistair Mayer and I were talking just last night about this, and we came to the conclusion that it's likely that his concept for faster than light travel, which is what Isidor Orlov uses, will probably be developed before mine.
Oh, wow, that's really cool.
So they end up in the star system of those invaders. There are two planets there, both of them populated, one by a bureaucratic, heavily bureaucratic administration that keeps a tight fist on everything, and the other is a freewheeling, libertarian-like economy that doesn't quite know what a government is. Thorpe and his people find themselves drawn to the second. The planet's name is Rogan, and together after they ward off military confrontation with Isidore Orloff, decide to build a huge starship and investigate, explore the universe. And in particular, and now I have to make an aside. In the real world that you and I live in, there is something called the cosmic microwave background, CMB. A Nobel Prize was awarded for its discovery. And a decade or so ago, maybe 15 years or so, some people discovered a cold spot in this microwave background, an area that is almost entirely void of galaxies, debris, gas, clouds. There's nothing. It's a void. And further investigation has many physicists, many astrophysicists suspecting, and this is really cool, that it might very well be the intersection of our universe with a parallel universe. Now, I don't mean
wow.
different universe, not a different galaxy, an actual completely new, totally separate universe from ours. Different laws of physics, everything, and they're intersecting at this point. So my guys with their starship that they call Andromeda is going to go there. And that forms the basis for the beginning of the third book, which is behind you, Ran.
Yes.
They come upon the star Ran is a real star. It's about 10 and a half light years from Earth. And they go to Ran and they find a planet that is populated by apparently reptilian based species. And these folks are they're an incipient space traveling species, kind of like we were in the Apollo days. They're in the process of sending their first capsule around their moon, Lodan, with a male and a female astronaut. And the lovely lady over your right shoulder is Jokara, the female astronaut from that capsule. Oh, that's
there we go.
Anyway, the people on the starship, this is both humans and Asterians from the Aster system, decide to bring the astronauts to the starship. So the capsule goes around the moon. Mission control loses contact as they normally would, and when the capsule reappears from around the moon, it's empty. Big deal. And we're seeing all of this from the point of view of the Asterians. After a quick but in-depth investigation, they conclude there's only one possibility, and that's that aliens have abducted their astronauts. Aliens being we.
We're the outsiders.
We're the outsiders. Now, it turns out that we didn't know about this civilization, and the reason is that they had been monitoring our radio and television transmissions and those from the Aster system and the conflict between humans and Asterians, and decided they wanted nothing to do with any of us because our technology was beyond theirs and we would crush them, we would destroy them. So they hunkered down and were in hiding. They weren't letting anybody know about their existence. They didn't use radio. They used direct laser beams for communication and so forth. So anyway, the story then takes place and things happen. Humans and Asterians get involved in the goings on the planet Aster, which is going around Ran. And eventually it all plays itself out. The next book, which you can see behind me, Keyed, A Lost Civilization, and you see there an image of the starship Aster, the starship Andromeda. It's a huge sphere with a cityscape on one side and a landscape, a mountainous landscape on the other side. It's 5 kilometers across, a huge thing. Anyway, when everything is finished at Ran, they head out to a triple star system called Keyed. Again, this is a real star system. And the main star, Keyed A, and this is an interesting aside, I doubt that there's anybody watching this interview who doesn't know something about Star Trek. And
yeah,
Keyed is the home star for the planet Vulcan, that is the home planet for Spock.
Oh, that's really cool. I did not know that. That's so awesome.
So the the starship arrives there, and of course, all of the humans are quite excited because this is the mythical home for Spock, and there isn't a human involved with space travel who doesn't know about Star Trek.
Sure.
They have to educate the Asterians and the Arcans to let them know what Star Trek was all about. Of course, this is a real planet, not a mythical planet, and they discover that the planet is being scavenged by microbots.
Oh,
And they
cool.
follow the microbots to Keed C, the smallest of the three stars, and there they find something called a Dyson sphere.
Ah, cool. I've read about those in Larry Niven's book, In Constant Star.
That's right.
Cool.
Okay, just now for the listeners, a Dyson sphere is named after Freeman Dyson, a physicist who was thinking big thoughts about far in the future events, and decided that if a race like ours started consuming more and more and more energy, at some point we will have consumed and be using all of the energy we're capable of producing on the planet. And if we want to use any more energy, and we'll have to keep advancing technologically, we have to begin to capture more and more energy from our star. And at some point, in order to be the most possible efficient about gathering this energy, we build a shell all the way around the star, starting off with our planet, using the materials from our planet to build this shell that has a diameter of, say, in our case, would be about a radius of 93 million miles. We're talking about something just mind-boggling.
Massive.
Absolutely massive. So they find this Dyson. Well, what do they find this sphere? They figure out after a while that it is a Dyson sphere, but they find out that these microbots are building. Well, they're scavenging one part of the Dyson sphere in order to build the other part. So the darn thing is never getting completed. And they investigate. They find 3 different sapient races inside. There may be more. This is so huge, but they do find 3. Eventually, they find uploads of the guys who built it. I'm not going to tell you who they are because that would be a terrible spoiler.
Yeah, please don't. No spoilers.
But eventually, they determine that Keed C, their star, the one that's inside this Dyson sphere, is about to superflare. And there's no telling what kind of damage that might cause. It could be just minor all the way to destroying the Dyson sphere. And so the remainder of the novel is about how they go about rescuing as many of the sapient beings as they can and the uploads.
Oh, wow. I love it.
So there you go. That's a summary.
I'm gonna also mention to anybody who's not as familiar with the Dyson sphere, if you've ever played the video game Halo, the concept of the rings, which was also borrowed from Larry Niven's Ring World, is a similar principle, where the ring is kind of moving in an orbit around a star. And also the game Final Fantasy III has a city called Cocoon that's similar to a Dyson sphere. It's nowhere near as big, but it's built around, a tiny little sun and that kind of thing. So I love this series because there's so much of the science that I read about as a kid that I loved in hard fiction. You begin with Icicle, and it's a lot like William Gibson's Mona Lisa Overdrive and other cyberpunk stories and little bits of the Matrix. And we discover that civilization. And so it starts to resemble, in the second book, it goes further and kind of blows the lid off all those neat ideas from the first one by adding more. And we get into things like Arthur C. Clarke. It just has that vibe. And Robert Heinlein throughout, as well as little bits of Asimov's Foundation. And so I've just finished prep for the third book. But as I read this story, once again, we have this amazing, when Star Trek, every episode could be new every week and you never knew what planet you were going to get. Each of these volumes is so unique. Even though there's a backstory and there's characters like Isidore Orloff that you know about, and of course, Braxton Thorpe, you still find these new interactions. This whole world with these sapient, sentient serpents is fascinating. It's a lot of fun, and the characters are very relatable. So with that said, I will go ahead and share So a lot of the fun with the first book really grew in the second book because the next volume had an alien species with lots of names of places and things that are in an alien language. And here we go again. We have a whole new planet and a whole new species. So what I want to do today is walk through some of these words and let's see if I can pronounce them correctly for you. And you can correct me if I'm wrong.
All right, let's go with it.
All right, here we go. I'm going to walk through the list real quick. The first thing I have is the Amred president, Benekot Katenji.
It's Benekat Katenji.
Benekot. Okay.
But you got Amred right. Amred is one of the nations on the planet Arcan.
Oh, that's right. I have it further down in the list. Yes. So Benekot Katenji.
You got it.
Okay, so the next one is the prophet of the Geroptic nation is Dodenji Vrokun.
That's good.
Awesome.
Dodenji Vrokun. Yep.
I did my homework, although I have to admit I had help from the teacher because I ran this list by you a little bit earlier, but make sure I'm on the right track. This is cool. So then we have one of the two astronauts that come from our world. One of them is Jokara Porovic from
That's
Cephid.
good. You said it right. Porovic, and she's the gal, the lovely gal just behind you.
There we go. I like her a lot. And then Kenred Zlaxis.
And he's her boyfriend.
And he is from the one of the other nations on the planet.
Okay, he's from Amred, and she's from Cephid. Cephid is a fascist-like dictatorship. Amred is a rather freewheeling republic, like we would like America to be.
It's great the way these stories do that, too, because just like the International Space Station and other space program efforts we've done here on Earth, these two are trying to get their nations to cooperate by working together to explore space. So then I have the chief military officer for the Geroptic nation is Nurian Claret.
Very good. Nurian Claret.
Cool.
General.
And there is a Cephid partisan leader, and I won't tell you anything else because there's a spoiler in there, but his name is Spajo Basut. Basut.
Yes. Spajo Bazut.
Spajo Bazut. Cool. And then the SPC director from Amred is Sudaro Ferron.
Sudaro Ferron.
Ferron.
And the SPC stands for Space Push Consortium, and it is a private venture that's based in Amron, and to which Cephid is playing a role, and Cephid supplies astronauts.
Cool.
And I said Amron, I meant Amred, the freewheeling nation.
Okay, got you. Yeah, the freewheeling nation is Amred, and the more uptight one is Cephid. And then, of course, the Geroptic folks, they're a little bit Luddite.
You might say.
They're further back technologically, but that doesn't mean that some of these folks lack smarts about the real deal. But I won't spoil it, I promise. So I mention that, though, because General Nerurian Claret from the Geroptic nation has an aide-de-camp named Tainol Dombit.
I think that's Tenil Dombit. Tenil Dombit.
Tenil Dombit. Got it. And then the same nation has a Dragon Army field commander named Blozak Garland.
Right.
Cool.
You can never quite tell whether he's a good guy or a bad guy.
Those are some of my favorite characters because they always have interesting reasons for the choices they make. Okay, so then the original Cephid leader is Boper Arklando.
Very good. Boper Arklando.
And Cephid's chief military officer is Darflom Baxerd.
Yes.
And there's an Amred chief military officer named Idoeti Kalambo.
Right.
Cool.
And he's a cool general.
He is not as easily rattled, that's for sure. Not as uptight as the Geroptic folks. They're a lot more nervous. And so the Cepheid chief military officer is Garkid Sudajos.
Correct.
And then we have a teacher in the Geroptic village named Judy Groklet.
Yeah, he's quite a guy.
I'll be inserting little letters along the bottom so you'll realize it sounds like Judy, but it's spelled very differently for those of you watching the video. So then the Dragon Bishop over in the Geroptic Republic is Clofut Gebala.
Right. And the reason we're using dragon is that for the Geroptic nation, they worship the great dragon in the sky, which is the sun. And they believe that that he is the creator and the originator of all things.
Harkening back to the Halo universe for gamers, this is a whole lot like the Covenant and the idea that they had a great journey and they had prophets. And it's very interesting because it's that same idea of, okay, we know we can fly among the stars, but at the same time, we still see the big giant star in the middle of our solar system as a magical being, you know, a deity that controls our lives, the great dragon in the sky. So then let's see, there's an Amred soldier named Matajo Guazan.
Yeah, he is a sergeant.
Cool. All right. Not all of my notes show where everybody goes, but on a funny side note, Robert, whenever I do your submarine stories, I really enjoy, with the Mac McDowell series, anytime anybody gets promoted who was from the last book, you mention that early on, and then I'm able to update my notes and say, well, now he's this rank. So then we have the mayor of the village of Cordan, and I won't mention what happens to him later, but Oklot Valorn.
Right.
And did I say Cordan right?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Then the SPC, the Space Program Flight Director.
Space Push Consortium.
There we go. Space Push Consortium. I love it. Every species has its acronyms. Let's see. Ostrop Nioria.
Let's call it Ostrop Naoria.
Ostrop Naoria. All right. Yes, I have a note here. I have rop like hop, but I need ost like cost. There we go. Ostrop Naoria. Okay, and then the Andromeda chief engineer from Rogan is Astrun Strozid.
Astrun.
Accidentally had a space.
He's a big deal in Rogan. He developed a very large mini black hole. I know that sounds like a contradiction, inside the moon of one of their giant planets, one of their gas planets. And Braxton really wanted to have him as part of the Andromeda crew, and he very much wanted to be part of it.
So it's giant in humanoid terms, but tiny in black hole terms.
Yeah.
Cool. Then I have the Arcans refer to Earth's solar system as Ditom.
Right.
So the bureaucratic state we mentioned earlier is named Cepheid, and its capital city is Cephidia.
Right.
Cool. And I already went through Amred and the Geroptic Nation, and we already know that Ran, the system, is pronounced Ran, like past tense of run.
Correct.
So the only other thing I want to mention is that when we talk about the space that traverses an area, we refer to it as cis-Lodan. When we're going across Lodan, we're in cis-Lodan space.
Right. Just like in our solar system and near Earth, it's cislunar space.
Oh, that's a perfect example. Yes, because we've used those in other books. So cislunar, cis-Lodan. Awesome. Well, Robert, that's all of them, and I got most of them. It's either a gold star or a silver star, one of the two, and I'm going to stick it up on the refrigerator so I remember. This is really cool, and I appreciate it. I will ask, though, is there anything else you'd like to say about the series before we wrap the video and I put this out on YouTube?
Yeah. Um, as you know, I have another series called the Star Child Trilogy, but we have renamed it the Star Child Saga because I wrote four short stories that were pulled into one volume that we call the Daedalus Files. It takes place in the same time frame and universe as Slingshot. And so we've put that in as the second book of the Star Child saga. And the Star Child Compact will be volume 3, and the Iapetus Federation will be volume 4. And we have the 4 volumes now of the Oort Chronicles. And I'm going to write another book later this year. The title will be Beyond the Beyond.
Oh,
And
cool.
this book will be the 5th book of both series. The chapters will alternate between the people and the players in the Star Child saga and the people and the players, including the various species, in the Oort Chronicles. As the Andromeda heads toward the cold spot, and as the guys in the Star Child saga head towards the cold spot in their universe.
Oh man, this is exciting. I love this. This is the ultimate team up.
At some point, that's what you get, is the ultimate team up, where they meet each other and they begin to find some of the tiny differences in the laws of physics between the two universes. And I won't go into that too much, except to say that it has something to do with the universal constant. And in case anybody out there has a background in and is wondering about this kind of physics, we're dealing here with entangled particles. And we're
Oh,
dealing
cool.
with the fact that one universe contains one half of an entangled particle pair, and the other universe retains the other half, and literally trillions of these. And thus, these universes become entangled, and thus the cold spot.
Quantum entanglement. I actually have a book on my shelf over here about that I read many years ago. That's really neat. One of the things I love about this, any book that Robert writes that's science fiction, you're going to get hard SF, which is the stuff that I needed as a kid. When I didn't have a whole bunch of science classes all around me, I had so many authors to explain things to me, like light speed and hyperspace and black holes. And of course, the Dyson sphere. I loved reading that sort of stuff, and it fired my imagination. And the same is true here, whether we're talking about cryogenic suspension and then a mind waking up inside of a virtual universe and having to put itself together again, which is the amazing beginning to this, or the part where I am right now, where we now have the ability to go not quite light speed, but super fast from one star system to another and meet new civilizations. It's pretty amazing to me, and I love the fact that you explain that all the way along the way in a way that's really engaging and goes right into the story. It's not a long aside where Heinlein might sometimes go, "No, I'm going to take a diversion into astrophysics, and if you don't like this, you should read ahead." No, it's you've woven it in really nicely.
Michael Crichton was a real master at being able to blend fiction and reality in such a way that unless you were really involved with it, you really didn't know where the fiction stopped and the reality started. And I like that model.
That's an amazing analogy because by sheer coincidence, just yesterday, my wife and I were talking about how the novel for Jurassic Park has one of the characters trying to go into Nedry's code and figure out OBJ White Rabbit and where that leads. And it explains it in a way that doesn't insult the reader and doesn't leave them lost at the technical jargon. And I thought, this is a really neat way to give people access to info. And we were talking about how he did the same with the Great Train Robbery by using the story to drive a picture of the world around the story.
Yeah, that's
Perfect.
right.
That's such a neat coincidence too. I love it.
A little anecdote related to the science behind the technology. A NASA scientist, Sonny White, had been working with NASA in NASA laboratories on warp space, on black holes, and at some point he broke off from NASA, opened up his own labs, and it's almost a year ago now, he actually created a mini warp bubble in his lab.
Oh,
And what he's
wow.
working on now is to scale this up to the point where it's usable on a human-sized thing. The spaceships, the starships that Isidore Orloff uses are based upon warp bubbles, and that's in the Oort Chronicles. And if you jump over to the Starchild saga, in the Iapetus Federation, there is a chapter where a young postdoc, deep down in the bowels of the Starchild Institute, is working on a project, and he is absolutely flummoxed by the results he gets because they're not possible. He runs the experiment a couple more times, and down to the 10th decimal place, he keeps getting the same answer. He takes his project up to the head scientist, and the next thing you know, they are developing wormhole transportation. This is exactly what Sonny White was doing. I didn't
love it.
know about Sonny White doing that when I wrote that. So I sent a copy of that chapter to Sonny White.
That is awesome. And I'm sure Sonny really enjoyed that and then dove into the whole series, because that's the other fun thing. If you're Star Trek, you have 48 minutes to get a point across and you don't have a lot of storytelling time. But if you're Robert Williscroft, you have 400 pages on average in which you can take your time to walk people through it so that you don't just say, and this other civilization figured it out too and it works exactly the same. Instead, each goes their own logical route based on the direction they were researching at the time.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And every once in a while, a character will step up and say, "You got it wrong. You got to go this way."
Yeah, because I know, for example, not to go too much into the technology for folks who haven't read it, but the idea that you have a little tensor disk that's very small, and Orlov has the same technology, but he calls it a brick because it's bigger. He just hasn't figured out the same thing they have as far as making it smaller.
Yeah, exactly.
Little details like that are pretty cool. Well, Robert, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, put this together on YouTube, and we will let people see it. And in the meantime, I will also mention to the audience that when Robert mentioned combining the series, I've done this once before with the Starchild trilogy that we originally called it. And I have a video that shows you how to do that. If you're an audiobook narrator or producer and you need to figure out a way to put together a bundle that touches on every title, stop by that video. I'll put a link in the comments. And in the meantime, keep an eye out for the other series, the Daedalus Files plus Starchild merged into one beautiful saga, coming out soon, and then eventually dovetailing its way into our current series with Ran and Cade. Thanks, everyone.